Good morning, students. Today, we'll start with a new essay on national prejudices by Oliver Goldsmith. In this essay, Oliver Goldsmith reflects on the incident when he met a group of persons who considered England to be the best nation of Europe. He finds faults and considered other nations to be imperfect in one or the other way. Goldsmith, on the other hand, on the contrary, praises cultural traits of other nations and he regards English to be headstrong and harsh. So, such criticism, of course, was not well received by the group and they questioned Goldsmith's faith and his nationalism. So, through this essay, Oliver Goldsmith discusses in length how people lack scientific and rationalistic approach and why people can't digest their own frailties and their own weaknesses. He also suggests that it is useless to explain your patriotism to others because they'll never understand this. As I am one of that sauntering tribe of mortals who spend the greatest part of their time in taverns, coffee houses, and other places of public resort, I have thereby an opportunity of observing an infinite variety of characters, which, to a person of contemplative turn, is a much higher entertainment than a view of all the curiosities of art or nature. Now, Oliver Goldsmith begins this essay by declaring that he likes to wander. Sauntering means to wanderer, to wander a lot, to roam around a lot. Oliver Goldsmith says that it is in his nature to roam around, to wander all around, and he spends most of the time in taverns. Taverns is inn or bar. He spends most of his time in these taverns, in these coffee houses, in different public places. So because of that, because of this nature, he meet so many type of people. He notices, he observes the nature, the manner and behavior of so many people around him, and he says that to a man of contemplative turn, thoughtful, a man who is thoughtful, a man whose nature is contemplative, that sort of person really like to observe people about their manners, about their behavior. So he says, because of this nature, because of my wandering nature, I come across so many people and I like to notice their behavior. In one of these my late rambles, I accidentally fell into the company of half a dozen gentlemen who were engaged in a warm dispute about some political affair, the decision of which, as they were equally divided in their sentiments, they thought proper to refer to me, which naturally drew me in for a share of the conversation. So Oliver Goldsmith says that what happened, he met some group of people, he met 6 or 7 people, and they all were discussing about a matter. They all were not one in the judgment. They were not able to decide who was true, who was not. So they all thought it proper to consider or to yes, to consider Oliver Goldsmith to be the proper judge. Okay, so they thought that whatever Oliver Goldsmith would say would be the final decision. ओके सो इस पैराग्राफ में ऑलिवर गोल्डस्मिथ कहते हैं कि वो उनकी जो नेचर है वो उन्हें घूमना बहुत पसंद है फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, और इसकी वजह से वो काफ़ी टाइम पब्लिक हाउसेस में स्पेंड करते हैं और इसी वजह से उन्हें लोगों को ऑब्ज़र्व करने का मौका मिलता है जो कि उन्हें बहुत अच्छा लगता है। और वो कहता है इसी दौरान उन्हें एक बार एक ग्रुप मिला और वो ग्रुप जो था वो किसी पॉलिटिकल अफेयर पे डिस्कस कर रहे थे और जिसका जजमेंट उन्होंने सोचा ऑलिवर गोल्डस्मिथ पे छोड़ दिया जाए। Among a multiplicity of other topics, we took occasion to talk to the different characters of the several nations of Europe, when one of the gentlemen, cocking his head and assuming such an air of importance as if he had possessed all the merits of the English nation in his own person, declared that the Dutch were a parcel of avaricious wretches, the French a set of flattering sycophants, that the Germans were drunken sots and beastly gluttons, and the Spaniards proud, haughty, and surly tyrants, but that in bravery, generosity, clemency, and in every other virtue, the English excel all the world. So, the topic which the group used to discuss, or they were discussing, were the different characteristics of several nations of यूरोप. तो उन्होंने डिसाइड किया कि यूरोप की जो कंट्रीज़ हैं वहाँ के जो लोग हैं, जैसे स्पेन के जो लोग हैं उनमें क्या खासियत है, फ्रेंच के लोग कैसे होते हैं, इटली के लोग कैसे होते हैं. सो दिस वॉज द टॉपिक विच दे डिसाइडेड टू डिस्कस. सो दे डिसाइडेड. सो one gentleman it was appearing as if he was arrogant. So while adjusting his hat, he declared that Dutch, or the people of Netherlands, he declared simply without thinking, without any rationalistic approach, he just declared that Netherlands, the people of Netherlands were considered as greedy, avaricious wretches, means they were considered as greedy. He declared that the French, people of France, they were flatterers, they were bootlickers, and the Germans, they were drunkards, they were alcoholics, and they were beastly gluttons, means they were overeaters. And to talk about the people of Spain, he declared that Spaniards, they were arrogant, they were proudy, and they were rude, they were tyrants, they were rude. So he declared that people of such a such country, people of all these countries, they lacked in one thing or the other. But lastly, he said that in bravery, in generosity, clemency is mercy. In mercy, or in every positive aspect, he declared in every other virtue, the English were the best. The English excelled all the world. So, this is the prejudice which Oliver Goldsmith will discuss on later. And due to this statement, due to this illogical statement, Oliver Goldsmith discusses at length that why people considered them to be best and why they think that others lack reason, others lack logic. So, Oliver Goldsmith, due to this statement, due to this declaration, Oliver Goldsmith was somewhat of offended. Okay, so once again I'll tell you, वो लोग ये डिसाइड करते हैं कि जो भी ट्रेड्स हैं अलग अलग नेशंस के लोगों में, जो क्वालिटीज़ हैं उनके बारे में वो डिस्कस करेंगे. और वो कहते हैं जो जो नीदरलैंड के लोग हैं वो बहुत ही ज़्यादा ग्रीडी होते हैं, जो फ्रांस के लोग होते हैं वो बहुत चापलूस होते हैं, जर्मन्स जो होते हैं वो बहुत एक तरह वो ड्रंकार्ड्स होते हैं और वो ओवर ईटर्स होते हैं, दे आर ग्लटन्स. स्पेन के लोग जो होते हैं वो बहुत घमंडी होते हैं. लेकिन बहादुरी में दया, अगर किसी को बोला जाए कि कोई दयालु है तो वो इंग्लिश होंगे. इंग्लिश पीपल जो हैं वो लोग दयालु होंगे. सो दिस इज़ द नेशनल प्रेजुडिस. This very learned and judicious remark was received with a general smile of approbation by all the company. All, I mean, but your humble servant. Okay, so this remark, this declaration was actually well received by the group members. जो उस जेंटलमैन ने ये जो रिमार्क किया था, दूसरे कंट्रीज़ के लोगों में तो ये कमियां हैं और इंग्लिश जो है वो बेस्ट है. तो ये जो डिक्लेरेशन है वो ग्रुप के सारे लोगों ने मान लिया. बट ओलिवर गोल्डस्मिथ ने ये जो बात है वो नहीं मानी थी. But your humble servant, who, endeavoring to keep my gravity as well as I could, I reclined my head upon my arm, continued for some time in a posture of affected thoughtfulness, as if I had been musing on something else, and did not seem to attend to the subject of conversation, hoping by these means to avoid the disagreeable necessity of explaining myself and thereby depriving the gentleman of his imaginary happiness. So, what happened was that this declaration was well received by the group. Okay, they all thought it to be true. जो भी कंपनी में लोग थे, जो भी इस ग्रुप में लोग थे, उन्होंने सबने इस बात को मान लिया कि हाँ ये सही बात है। जो इंग्लिश है वो तो बेस्ट होते हैं और बाकी के जो नेशन के लोग हैं उनमें कोई ना कोई कमियां तो ज़रूर होती ही हैं। सो Oliver Goldsmith, he actually avoided declaring his opinion or declaring what he thinks. Why? Because, of course, he was of the contrary opinion. उसका जो मानना था वो एकदम अलग था. So he thought it to be proper to avoid explaining his views. बिकॉज ही थॉट अगर वो अपने व्यूज़ को बोलेगा तो यहाँ पे जो लोग हैं वो बिल्कुल भी उसकी बात को नहीं मानेंगे. सो ही ट्राइड टू अवॉइड द ग्रुप. ही रिक्लाइन मीन्स टू लाई डाउन. So he reclined on his head, he reclined his head on his arm, and he continued for some time. He sat there as if he was thinking about some other thing, as if he was musing on something else. So through his gestures, through his postures, he tried to avoid the conversation. He tried to avoid giving his opinion. Why? Because his views were totally different from that gentleman. Okay, so Oliver Goldsmith decided to stay calm, to stay mute. Next part we'll do in the next lecture. Thank you.